Thanks for joining us for introducing the Iowa Water, Wastewater, and Stormwater dashboards. My name is Hope Thompson. I am a project director at the Environmental Finance Center at UNC-Chapel Hill. I'm joined today by Emma Copenhaver. She's a project analyst with us. And Emma is going to help me keep an eye on the time and keep an eye on the question box. So I am going to try to reserve some time at the end of the webinar today for questions, but feel free to pop them in the box and we can try to address them as we go along as well. Also, if we don't get to your questions today, I'll make sure to put my email address in the chat at the end of the webinar so that you can email us. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have after the webinar via email. Today, I'm going to spend about 35 minutes on this presentation, and then we're going to actually jump into demoing the dashboards really quickly themselves. I'm going to say it now, and I'll probably reiterate that the Iowa dashboards are not public yet. We are actually giving this webinar a bit earlier than we normally do. So we're in the final phases of getting the dashboards ready, but we can kind of walk you through the process, and then they will be online in May. So keep an eye out for that, and we can, if you access it in May and want to have a conversation then or have questions then, we can always go over those. Okay, so let's see. Let's get started. So Emma and I both work for the Environmental Finance Center at UNC. We are hosted within the School of Government at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And our mission is to enhance the ability of governments and other organizations that provide environmental services and programs, so water, wastewater, stormwater services, and help them provide those in fair, effective, and financially sustainable ways. We do that through direct advising, so technical assistance directly with utilities, working one-on-one or in small groups. We do applied research to various problems and processes that people ask us to jump in on. And then we also do teaching and outreach. One of the things that we do really well and have been doing for a very long time is the development of data-driven tools to inform utility decision-making. And one of those is our water and wastewater rates dashboards. So this is a data visualization tool that we first started doing about 18 years ago. It helps to address the need for utilities to do peer comparisons for their rate structures, but also to conduct self-evaluation of their rates and to do self-evaluation of their finances in general. We have done dashboards in multiple places across the country. What this map does not show is places where we do them over and over again. So in North Carolina, for example, we update our dashboard every year. Other places we've only done one update. And in May, then our newest dashboard will be Iowa. You can see there with a little yellow star on it. So we're really excited. This has been a great dashboard for us to work on, and we're excited to show it to you all and for you all to use it in the coming months. Now, where is this project really coming from? So this was funded by the Iowa Finance Office and the State Revolving Fund. So thank you for our funders for helping us in this work. And then we had a great partner as well through the Iowa League of Cities. And we couldn't have done it without these fantastic partners. So thank you to you both. Now, before we jump into the data dashboard itself, and I'm going to walk you through every nitty-gritty little piece, our rule of thumb at the EFC is you never consider rates alone. So just because someone drives a Porsche doesn't mean that they're wealthy. Low rates doesn't mean that a utility is healthy, right? It's just one piece of the picture. And so this rate information should always be accompanied by other information that gives the full story, paints the full picture, and lets you know what else is behind those rates. Okay, so that's why we're going to look at some bill comparisons today, but we're also going to look at some other metrics to assess financial sustainability and financial health. This dashboard uses a lot of different data sources. So we use census data from the 5-year estimates of the American Community Survey. We use system characteristics from the EPA Safe Drinking Water Information System. We get rate information directly from from you all, from the utilities, so thank you for that. And then we have audited information from the Iowa Office of the State Auditor, and we kind of bring this all together to create some of the outputs that we're about to see. So let's go ahead and look at the dashboard. For Iowa, we have a number of about almost 900 rate charging utilities in Iowa. About 72% of you have participated, so thank you. We see that just over 3 million folks have access to these services, or 94% of Iowa's population. We have about 582 water providers that have given us data, 537 wastewater providers, and 127 stormwater providers. And there is overlap between those numbers, okay? So some of those could be providing 2 services or all 3. We have a range of different types of organizations that are providing this data, mostly municipalities, local governments, but also for-profit systems, districts, and others such as HOAs. And we see a really wide range of service populations that are being given water and wastewater services through these utilities. So from 25 people in your service area to well over 200,000. When we're looking at the dashboard, this is what the overall page looks like. And I know the text is crazy tiny and it's hard to read, so I'm going to have some zoomed in pictures. But basically on the left side, you have your data inputs. So this is where the fun toggles and drop-down menus are, and you can slide things around and change it up. And then depending on how you change it, that's going to adjust the dials on the right, so the output dials. The first thing you need to do when you're looking at the dashboard is to select your community from the drop-down menu at the top. And I apologize to anyone who's here from the town of Ackley. You are our example for a lot of the presentation today because you're at the top of the alphabet. But some of the dials are not pertaining to Ackley later on. So just keep that in mind. When you get to selecting your community, you can either use the drop-down and scroll, or there's also a feature where you can start typing, and any utilities that match what you're typing will pop up. So the dropdown will kind of adjust. You can select which services you're interested in. So you can see there's a water bill, a sewer bill, or 2 of them combined. And then you can also select your consumption point. So the slider for consumption ranges from 0 gallons. And at that point, the bill that's displayed would effectively be a base charge. And then all the way up to 15,000 gallons at 500-gallon increments. So you can slide that to whatever bill amount you're interested in seeing. We have it set at a pretty standard default consumption, which is considered to be an average household's monthly consumption. We have it at 5,000 gallons. If you're a utility that uses cubic feet instead of gallons, there is a conversion there for you as well, so that you can see what is most relevant for you. Right under that portion of the dashboard is our map. One of my most favorite parts. I just really like maps. So you can see with the little red dot, that is the selected utility. And then everywhere else is displayed in different shades of blue. The darker blues are those that are being displayed in this current view. And that'll make more sense when we go through the live demo of the dashboard. You can see how those will change. The map shows the approximate locations of utilities in this survey. Right above the map is our comparison group drop-down menu. So right now we have all utilities selected, so everywhere that we collected data from. But if you're a very small town, then you might not want to compare yourself to some of Iowa's really large metropolitan areas. So you can change these comparison groups. We often call them peer groups with this drop-down menu. And you can compare your utilities output to utilities with the same characteristics. At the bottom of the map, we have our rate increase slider. So this will show approximations of how the dials will change if you raise your rates. This is highly speculative. And again, I can show this in the live demo, but this is at the bottom. If you want to kind of play with what would it look like to raise rates by 1, 5, 10% over time. Okay, so now we're going to get into the outputs now that you know kind of what is possible. The dashboard has 4 dials that represent certain metrics for your utilities. So it looks at your bills compared to others, your conservation signal, cost recovery, and median affordability. Those first 2 are comparative within your peer group. So the dials will adjust according to which peer group you select. That's bill comparison and conservation signal. And so those, how the little arrow on the dial moves around is relative to whichever comparison group you selected. We have quite a few comparison group options. They won't be available for every utility though, because we have to have sufficient information to kind of build a peer group. So if there's insufficient utilities in the peer group, it'll just be grayed out on the drop-down menu, but all of the ones that are available are number of accounts, customer income, revenue generation, the type of water source that you're using, the type of ownership. So say you only want to compare to municipalities like yourself, for example, what kind of rate structure type you're using, or if you want to only look at your closest neighbors, so a radius around yourself. Okay, so the bill comparison dial is where we're going to start. And this allows you to see how your bill compares to others in your selected comparison or peer group at that selected usage. So keep that in mind. You really want to have all your outputs exactly where you want them. And if you aren't keeping those inputs in mind, then you might see a number that's more alarming than what you think it is. So we've used the rate information that you gave us to calculate bills at different consumption points. As you adjust that consumption slider, and as you adjust the peer groups, this bill comparison dial will change too. So the bill amount will change, and if you change the peer group, then you'll probably also swing around as how you compare. There's kind of these different colorful bands that we're going to walk through what they mean. So in this middle band, this darkest green band, that's the middle 50% of utilities, or the 25th to the 75th percentile. So half of all utilities within whichever peer group you've selected have bills that fall within this range. We have an example here that is from a different dashboard altogether, but their utility bill, their water bill is $29.47 at 5,000 gallons of consumption. That's just about right in the middle. So it's higher than about half of the utilities within the comparison group, and it's lower than about half of the utilities. So right near the median. If you're falling within these light green bands, that's 15% below the middle 50% and 15% above the middle 50%. So if we think of that percentile wise, it's the 10th to the 25th percentile of bills, and then the 75th to the 90th percentile of bills. Both of those green bands combined make up 80% of the utilities within a comparison group. So if we're thinking about that from a percentile perspective, it's the 10th percentile to the 90th percentile. So excluding the lowest 10 and the highest 10. So this is most of the utilities within the peer range. Those yellow bands are going to be the lowest and the highest 10% of the utilities within the peer comparison group. So if you're falling in that lower yellow band, you're in the bottom 10%. The lowest bills, lower than 90% of other utilities. If you're in the rightmost yellow band, your bills are higher than 90% of the utilities in that group. If we're looking at this example, we can see there's those minimums and those maximums, and there's a substantial disparity here. So within this peer comparison group, there's almost a $75 difference for consumption at 5,000, or I suppose it's at 6,000 gallons. So that's a pretty big split depending on where you are. In Iowa, the median bill amount as of today, April 6th, and I say that because we are still doing some data collection and quality assurance, but as of today, the median bill amount for all utilities on the dashboard at 5,000 gallons of monthly water consumption is $41.60. So 50% of bills in Iowa are less than this amount, and 50% of bills in Iowa are higher than this amount. Okay, so moving on to the conservation signal dial. Again, this is a relative dial that depends on the peer group that's selected. This dial shows the price per 1,000 gallons for the first 1,000 gallons after 10,000. So think of that person, that user who's using a lot of water. What do they have to pay once they break that 10,000 gallon volumetric usage? Again, it's relative, so it compares that price to other utilities. And the idea behind this is that if your utility wants to encourage water conservation, then this marginal price of that first 1,000 after 10,000 should increase. So it should be almost like a prohibitive cost if you want to discourage that really high water use for customers. So on the conservation signal dial, the percentiles are a little bit easier. So it's just quartiles. Okay, so that first very light yellow band is 0 to 25% of utilities. The next kind of lime green band is 25 to 50. Then we have that neon green, which is 50 to 75. And then this dark green where the red arrow is pointing is 75 to 100. So in this example, the marginal price of the 1,000 gallons is above the 75th percentile in its peer group. So this utility, relative to its peers, has a pretty strong conservation signal. In Iowa, the median marginal price of that 1,000 that occurs right after 10,000 gallons of consumption is $5.60. And I'm sorry, now I'm realizing it would be really interesting to know how that might compare to other states. I don't know that off the top of my head, but you can check out other dashboards if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, so there's two dials which are not based on where a utility stands in its peer group. So these are just about you, just about your utility, specific to you. The first is cost recovery. We're going to spend a little while talking about that. And the second is median affordability. So cost recovery, we also refer to this as an operating ratio. Some of you might be familiar, so bear with me if you are. But this is just calculated by dividing your operating revenues by your operating expenses. And we include depreciation as an operating expense if you have it in your budget or in your audit as an expense. And so what this can tell us is, are your revenues covering your everyday costs, day-to-day costs of running your utility, and covering a little bit of planning for the future, for those future capital improvements? And that's why that depreciation is in there. If you're expensing depreciation every year as an expense to your utility, then you're accounting more for that wear and tear over time on your system. So for the cost recovery dial, then the colors have a little bit more meaning behind them. So our cost recovery, our operating ratio dial goes from 0 to 3. Anything under 1 is in red. And this, if your operating ratio is under 1, that means that your costs are exceeding your revenues to some degree. So this is a concern for financial sustainability. It suggests that a utility may be having trouble meeting its day-to-day costs, at least in the particular year that the financials were sourced from. And it also means that if you're not meeting your day-to-day costs, that you're probably not meeting those long-term planning goals as well. If you're in this first yellow zone, this is an operating ratio between 1 and 1.2. That means that day-to-day costs are currently being covered, but it could be problematic when you consider paying for long-term expenses. So when you're thinking about those large capital improvement projects, or that one piece of equipment that you know any day could just totally kick the bucket and you'll have to make a plan for financially, if you're in this range, then you're not quite getting there and being able to address that. With respect to inflation, we say 1.2 is, and you'll see on the next slide, above 1.2, you're in this nice little green zone. And that helps to account for the increased cost of materials in the future due to inflation. All right, here we are in the green band. So we use 1.2 as a great financial benchmark. Anything above that, we'll see up to about 2.8 it's considered a financially sustainable utility. So this is a great place to shoot for if you can, when you're looking at your operating ratio, to feel like you are in a better place for both covering your day-to-day costs and planning sufficiently for the future. Okay, and then there's a yellow band at the top as well. So this is an operating ratio from 2.8 to 3. This may suggest that your revenues are too good. So you're either bringing in too much revenue, your rates may be unjustifiably high, or maybe you're not accounting for an expense like depreciation that you need to. So I kind of take this zone as an invitation to be curious about what's happening in your utility. If you are a not-for-profit system, if you're a municipal public system, then you might need to consider your mission and how those rates are, even though they're making your operating ratio look really good, what is the trade-off there? So are your rates unaffordable, which we're going to talk about next, or is there something else that you could be investing in your system? Okay, so median affordability dial, it's the one, it has its own color scheme. So it's a totally different assessment of your bill amount. It uses median household income data in the census area or areas that are served by your utility, and shows what percentage of annual income would be spent on the water bill or water and sewer or just sewer, based off of median household income in that area. So I'll show you what we mean. So annual water bills as a percentage of the MHI, basically the dial just increases from 0 to 6%, and that orange color, the darker the orange, then the higher percentage of someone's income each year is spent on bills. These darker areas, really any of this may be concerning to you depending on what you know about your customer base. So this is only one piece of the affordability puzzle. Affordability is really complex, and we're not going to say that 1% or 2% or 3% is an acceptable amount. It depends on other affordability considerations in your community. To help with this, there's a little tiny question mark right next to that dial, next to all the dials, and that will pop up a help box that can help you interpret it. It's really hard to assess and visualize affordability, and we recognize that there's no universal metric capturing all of those nuances and factors. So we include this additional information, and we have some additional tools that the EFC has developed as well to help you assess affordability in your own community. One of these tools is our affordability assessment tool. This is available on our website. And there's a lot going on in this graphic. It kind of takes a while to sink in, but the biggest thing is that you can see both a distribution of income in your census area, as well as the percentage of household income that's spent on your utility bills with your current rates and any proposed rate increases or changes. So on this slide, these 3 bars in red, those are just our lowest income buckets for this community. Oh, my apologies. And we can see that the lowest income bucket is spending over 7% of their income annually on their water bill. So this is something that you can take a stab at yourself if you would like to, but we can also assist with setting this tool up and interpreting it. Okay, back to the dashboard. So we spent a lot of time on the main part of the dashboard, which is where the dials and the fun interactive bits are, but there's some other information as well. So there's a characteristics tab that contains additional details about system demographics, characteristics, and financials. This tab can also be changed by comparison group. So you can pick out that peer group and see how you compare for number of connections or service population to your closest neighbors, perhaps, or to folks who are using a similar rate structure as you. And so you can, this has individual information, but can also be compared to those peer groups. There's also a financial benchmark tab. So we went through some of the, we went through cost recovery. That's a big financial benchmark that we spent a lot of time on with systems. But there's some other ones that are included as well as data was available to us. So we have measures of liquidity, like a quick ratio. So are you able to meet your short-term obligations? Days cash on hand. If all your customers left tomorrow, or perhaps there was a global pandemic that prevented folks from paying their utility bill, how long can you keep the lights on? Asset depreciation. So what is the long-term health of your system, and how has your system, how much of it is reaching the end of its lifetime or getting up there in age? And then capital outlays. So how much are you setting aside each month, or each year, sorry, each year to look at those future capital needs. Each dial is accompanied by a help box for more information about what that ratio means. And there's some links to EFC resources as well. You can, like I said, there's a slider to raise rates by a certain percentage. I'm going to show that in just a minute. I'm almost done with my slides here. And then there's also a tab to download the data for this specific utility. And that could be helpful if you are hoping to share the results of this dashboard with someone, and you don't want to have to re-input everything. You want to kind of save your results. These dashboards are helpful because they're dynamic and they can be changed very quickly, but sometimes, you know, you just want the printout of what you went through. So I just have a couple more slides. We're almost to the end and then of the slides, and then I'll check out questions and then we'll do the live demo. I'm not going to show this video actually about financial benchmarking, but I did want to bring it up to you all. The EFC has a lot of resources on our website. Like I said, additional tools. We do a blog post every month, sometimes more, about our projects and resources. And we have this great video on YouTube. It's just a really great way to learn about financial benchmarking. And it uses this analogy of a person trying to take care of their car. And that for me really solidified, you know, what are these financial benchmarks about? Why do we care? Where do they come from? And so I would definitely encourage you all to watch this. It's less than 10 minutes. So definitely check it out. And we can try to put the link to this in the chat as well. I will find it and put it in there. Okay, so when should you financially benchmark? And when should you maybe use the dashboard tool? In North Carolina, where we've been doing this for many, many years, we hear that people use this every year, and they really rely on it as an interpretive tool for them. You might use it as part of your annual rate review to check out your rates, how they're stacking up to your neighbors, and how they're contributing to the overall health of your system. If you're presenting to your town board or other decision makers and you need them to understand a little bit better all of the competing priorities that utilities face, and I know it's a lot of them, then a tool like this that's so visual and that they can ask questions and then you can very quickly model how that might change the results for your utility, that might be a good time to use this. If you're explaining rates to customers, I think customers also sometimes lack that understanding of why it's important to be charged a fair and sustainable rate. They might just look at neighbor town and say, they pay half the amount for their water, what's the deal? But maybe neighbor town isn't making long-term sustainable plans like you are. So this could be a helpful tool for that. And if there are any regulated systems on the call, if you're making a rate case to a utility commission or something similar, then this can be a helpful tool for that situation as well. Okay, so like I said, the Iowa dashboard is not quite live and public yet. So what we're going to do, and we're going to do in not next week, but the following week, is you'll be getting an email from us again, like the one you got to register for this, asking you to review your rates. You will have 10 business days to review them, and we can make updates at that time. But once the dashboard goes live, if you get on there and you still see something that's wrong, please let us know. If you know that you haven't sent them in, then feel free to send them in after this call. But remember, we have gotten them from 72% of y'all. So I think if you're on the call, it's highly likely that you sent them in already. And thank you for that. but you can email them to us, efc@unc.edu. Please send us your residential and commercial rates. If you have a change in rate based on inside versus outside or city versus rural, please include that. The billing period, monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever you do, and the date the rate became effective. And please give us everything. So we want to know the base charge, what your blocks are. We want all of the details, whatever is relevant to you, so that we can input it into our system and have it displayed on the dashboard. But don't worry about doing that now. Like, you're going to, if you haven't sent them in, you can send them in. But if you have, you're going to get to review them this month. Okay, I know I'm getting up to the time I said to Emma that I was going to be done with slides, and we're almost to the end. So I did want to look at a quick example community to see why accurate benchmarking with more than just a rate comparison is essential. And that's why we really care about this tool. So this is a real community that's been de-identified. You can see that this utility is in the yellow zone for their rates compared to their peer group. So they're only charging $18 for 5,000 gallons, and they are in the lowest 10% of their state. Their rates appear quite affordable. It's only 0.77% of the MHI, but they have a really low operating ratio, 0.46%, or 0.46, apologies. So they are not bringing in sufficient revenues to cover their costs. Now, like I said, that operating ratio is from the year that we sourced financials from. So maybe they just had an off year. It happens. You know, your customer base goes down, your expenses go up, you have to replace something all of a sudden. It can happen. But we see this sometimes where folks also just are not concerned with their operating ratio, and it stays quite low from year to year. What happened with this utility is that there was a hurricane that severely and permanently impacted the number of water customers that they were serving. So you can see that the number of customers was slowly declining. It was just over 500, slowly declining over time. And then in 2017, there was a hurricane, and they have not recovered that number of customers since that time. It has been increasing again, but it's not going to recover to that original amount. So seeing this trend, you know, makes me think that maybe their low operating ratio was not an anomaly, that it was already quite low, and then it probably took a big dip when this event occurred. And they could have maybe seen that if they were looking at the data over time as well. So there's already a decline in average monthly water use for this community, even before the hurricane. So their revenues were never going to catch up unless they made a change from the utility side. This is a somewhat worst case scenario, but we've seen things similar to this more than once. So it's a good thing to keep an eye out for, and definitely a reason to use financial benchmarks every single year to stay up to date on your financial situation. Okay, so we're not done with the webinar. We're going to swap into a web browser, and I'm going to show you what the dashboards look like live. I know we haven't talked anything about Stormwater, and I promise I will touch on Stormwater at least briefly. But here is some of our information. So that is the email address that you can use. I'm actually going to put in the chat as well my personal email address, just in case that is helpful to everybody. Oh, and that is not to, let's see, to everyone. There we go. So hopefully you all can see that. Please send us an email if you have a question, or if you want to learn more about the dashboard that you didn't learn in this webinar. Are there questions, Emma, that have been coming into the chat, or it looks like you answered them all?
Yes, the only one was, I just wanted to get some clarification. The slides were going to be sent out after the webinar.
I can send out the slides. I'm definitely going to include a recording of the webinar, but if folks would like the slides themselves to refer back to, I understand that, and we can include that as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and then I see the other one was If you're unsure, you can send an email, totally. And we can check if we have them, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing or I'm going to reshare, I suppose. And we're going to look at the dashboard. So hopefully you all are seeing, I'm going to wait for Emma to give me a thumbs up that I'm great. Okay. So here we have the Iowa Water and Wastewater dashboard. This is a work in progress version. So we're going to have some logos on here. We're hopefully going to have a couple more rate structures entered. But this is what you'll be able to see once the dashboard goes live in a couple weeks. You can see, just like we walked through on the slides, that we have our inputs on this left-hand side. So I can change our consumption amounts, and you can see that the dials, the top two dials, shift as we do that. And so we're seeing a very different range for these, and we can see that our comparison or our selected community at the top, that their bill changes within those colored bands. So I'll put that back down here. You can also select seeing the sewer bill. And what I wanted to show that was harder on the slides is if you toggle between water and sewer, see how the map, those blue dots change. So some of them are going to be the same for folks who provide water and sewer, but sometimes this will shift. And so they're kind of hard to see, but there's this light blue kind of grayed out, and those are utilities we have information for, but they just they don't provide the service that is being shown or selected at this time. Now is a great time for people to be popping questions in the chat now that we're on here. If there's something specific that they want to see, if there's one person who's like really wants to see their data very quickly, then I could do that. I'm just not going to spend a ton of time walking through their data, but if you have questions now that we're on this page, please let us know. I also wanted to show you all about the rate slider box, because there's a really important disclaimer. So if we say, let's raise the rates by 22%, which would be, maybe a shock for your customers, you can kind of see this like hairline of the original rate that was there. See, I guess maybe you all aren't seeing my mouse. But there's this hairline of what was the original rate, and then the slider has, or the little clock arm has adjusted to the projected rate. And we have this red box, alarming box, that says revenue impacts are highly speculative. This assumes across the board rate increases for all customer classes. And keep in mind that revenue impacts assume a 3% drop in demand for every 10% increase in price, due to folks sometimes can use less water if you start charging them enough for it. So that price elasticity piece. I haven't actually used the slider very much. And if a rate increase is something that you're considering, that might be something we can help you with more in more focused technical assistance work. And modeling what that would look like for your community. I'll bump this back down, and what I'll do is show you the comparison group drop down, and then I think we'll move on, unless there's questions, we'll move on to the stormwater dashboard. So have any questions come in, Emma?
I haven't seen any questions come in.
Okay. So, right, so this comparison group dashboard. So right now we're comparing to all utilities in the state. We can go to this dashboard, and let's say that we only want to look at utilities that have a similar number of accounts. So we don't want to be comparing tiny utilities to really large utilities. We just want to look at the ones that are kind of in the same bucket. So we could just select that. You can see that they're only, this is where those dots come in handy, is seeing how the comparison groups kind of shake out. And that's going to change. So we're looking at some 10,000 to 25,000 account holders here. I didn't really see that the bill comparison changed that much for this utility, but now this percentile, what's in the denominator, is only utilities who have this number of accounts. Let's see if we look at same ownership type. Okay. So we can see there's a lot of utilities that share the ownership type with this municipality. That makes sense because we know that we mostly have municipalities here. Again, I'm not seeing huge changes in the bill comparison dial, but that could certainly change. I'll pick one more. Oh, let's look at their nearest neighbors. There we go. So we can see when we looked at their nearest neighbors, so within 50 miles of the utility, you can kind of see that little bubble, that radius there. And the bill didn't change. And I guess that's what I should have been more specific about. The bill isn't changing, but we are seeing that this little clock arm is going from the 10th to the 25th percentile down to the bottom 10th. So they're the more affordable rates in that area. Okay, I did see a question come in now. Will you be sending info on how to get to this site once it goes live? Yes, absolutely. So we'll send an email that requests you to review your rates before the site goes live. That's probably the email where I'll include the slides and the webinar recording as well, because I want to send you all fewer emails whenever possible. And then as soon as the site is live, we will send that out as well. If you got to this webinar not via an email from the EFC, please send us an email so we can make sure that you're on our mailing list. So if someone forwarded it to you, or you got it from a friend, or whatever it may be, you saw it online, please let us know so that we definitely have your email. Okay, great. I'm going to, I guess I'll keep it here. And I'll just show the characteristics tab, because that's also comparative. So we can see that there's things that are relevant to the utility. So service population, number of connections. This is a little less helpful, I suppose, when you're looking geographically, but you can also toggle the comparison group right here. So similar number of accounts. We can see that the median, that's what's displayed here, is the median for our utilities. And we can also see the size of the comparison group. So we have 12 utilities that fall into this bucket. And then at the bottom, we can also see some comparisons for household size, the household income, and the poverty rate. And remember, I really like these comparison groups because a Porsche doesn't mean I'm rich, and low rates doesn't mean I'm a healthy utility. So having all this other context for how you're comparing yourself, not just to benchmarks, but also to your peers, can be very, very helpful. Okay, I'm about to leave the water and wastewater dashboard altogether. So final chances to request to see something live. Okay. I guess I could come back if you all really want me to, but I'm going to move on to the stormwater dashboard. Okay, the stormwater dashboard is a bit different, and I don't have slides on it because I thought we could just walk through it together. Again, this will be shared out with everybody. Stormwater might not be relevant to everyone on the call, and I understand that. So if it's not relevant to you, or you're not super interested, maybe mull over some questions that you have for us at this time. We host our stormwater dashboards a little bit differently in Tableau Public. Iowa is only the second state, I believe, that we've done stormwater for after North Carolina. So it's been a really interesting project to work on for myself and Emma. What we're looking at is summarizing stormwater fees by utility. This dashboard, I would say we still have some changes that are in the works, whereas the structure of the water and wastewater one is pretty set. This one, we have a couple of other tweaks to make. So just keep that in mind as we're moving through. We're going to start just with this bills by location tab, which is very similar to the water and wastewater dashboard as well. And hopefully it works. It's being a little finicky with me. There we go. So, and I apologize. I know that the text on this is small, and that's one of the things I want to try to change in the next few weeks. So here we're showing bills by location for stormwater. Very similar. We have a map in the center. There's a bit more going on with those dots though. So there's a bit more meaning behind them. If I hover over them, I can see the name. So here we have Des Moines Waterworks. We can see the kind of rate structure that they use, their population group, average price for stormwater bills, their service population, MHI, and I don't know what city origin point means. Honestly, it's probably something spatial, but so there's a little more information here. We can see that the residential bills, a lot of them are similar size, but that dot does matter. So it's indicating, you know, bill amount. We can toggle, we can either click if we want to change origin points. We can click on something. This is Riverside and say keep only. That kind of filters us down just to this guy. We can unselect that and it should go back to all of the utilities. It's just thinking about it. Maybe it's not going to. Let's see. We're going to reload it. That is my trick with Tableau Public. It's just reload the page. Here we go. All right, so we're back. You can also change the origin point if you want to use the drop-down menu and pick one of these others. And it will highlight that other utility down at the bottom. So at the bottom of the page, we have residential bill amounts for residential stormwater, commercial, and multifamily. And so if you change the origin, it's going to highlight that one in orange. So it's a little bit easier to see. The other thing you can do is filter by comparison group within 25 miles. So you can just look at a smaller range. That is incorrect. So this is helpful, a helpful experience. I apologize for that. But you can also toggle the bill amounts by amount of impervious area. So if you increase the impervious surfaces, then you should be able to see, you know, corresponding bill amounts where appropriate. Okay, so let's look at some of these other tabs. So here we have bills with some more customer data and some more variables included. So again, this time, like these markers have more information behind them. So the larger the marker, the higher the population. The different symbols indicate median household income buckets. So you can see some of the underlying character of who is being charged these stormwater fees. We have MS4 permit status. And again, you can toggle the bill amount and it will change down here. Okay. I'm going to move on to the last tab that we currently have. So on this tab for residential fees, we've separated our stormwater utilities by fee type. So we have folks who charge a flat fee. So no matter what the impervious surface is for stormwater, they charge that amount to everybody every month. Nothing changes. So similar for water and wastewater, it's like no volumetric consideration. A tiered flat fee is kind of like if you were using blocks. So within different buckets of impervious surface areas, that there's different fees associated with those. And then there's also uniform rates. And so this is when fees are charged per equivalent residential unit. So that's a standard charge that is applied to a varying square footage amount. So if we have your ERU, if you're a utility that charges by ERU, then that's what's being shown here. Okay, stormwater dashboard's a little bit quicker to go through because I think it's more interesting for if you have like a very specific question that you're trying to hunt down. So I'll go back to the main tab, and we finished a little bit early, but I wanted to save the last 10 minutes for questions. So this is time to enter your questions in the chat, or if you want us to double check that your town is on here, we could do that for you with our extra time. Otherwise, thank you all for joining. If you don't have questions, or if you don't want to stick around for Q&A, thank you so much for joining. Thank you to the Iowa Finance Authority and the SRF program for funding this dashboard. Thank you to Iowa League of Cities for their help and their partnership in this. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining, and I'm excited for the dashboard to go live and for you to be able to use it. Thank you, Erin. Daryl, yes, we can check to see if Sioux Center is in, I believe. It looks like, yes. And on Stormwater too, because that name sounds very familiar to me. But I can double check. Yep, we got you. Thank you, Lori. Thank you. I'm glad you think it will be a good tool. I'm excited to hear, how people start using it once it's live. It's kind of different in every state. Sure, I can check these other places. Why not? Indianola. Looks like we have you. Nashua. All right, and we can check for Stormwater too. I don't know if it applies, but I'll just look really quickly. Looks like yes. And Nashua, we don't have Stormwater for you, but maybe that's because you don't have a Stormwater utility. So if you do, please email us. I'll check Newton. No Stormwater, but maybe you don't have a Stormwater utility. That's fine. It looks like we have Newton's data too. You do have Stormwater, you'll email me. Wonderful. Thank you for doing that. All right, I've been trying to keep track of the questions. I'm gonna say I answered them live and it's done.
We've also, oh, never mind. I think there was someone that raised their hand. Oh, maybe their hand is still up.
Oh, okay. Oh, Karen Davis, would you like to type your question into the, oh, okay, thank you. Sorry to call you out. Just wanted to make sure you didn't want to ask a question. Okay, I think those are all the questions. So we got done a little early. Again, please email us. Please check out our other EFC resources as well if they are helpful to you. If you're not sure and you're like, hey, we're having this problem, do you have anything to help? I'm happy to try to connect you with the resources that we might have or that one of our sister EFCs might have. So looking forward to hearing from you all. And once the dashboard goes live, can't wait to hear some feedback and what you all think about it. So have a great one, and thanks for joining. Bye.